It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. If you just go to my email address, contact me directly through email at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Really excited about our show today. We have a young journalist, a student journalist, Quinn Mitchell. You could find him at quinnmitchell.com. Now, he's got a podcast called Into the Tussle. And fascinating guy. This guy, you can find him on Twitter, too, as well, at Into the Tussle. Fascinating guy. He's bold, bold. He's out there asking tough questions on the campaign trail to the point where he gained notoriety. I heard about him because Ron DeSantis kicked him out of a press conference, okay? I haven't been kicked out yet, but I'm working on it. Mr. Quinn Mitchell, are you there?
I am there. How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. And I tell you, I'm happy to have you on the show. Before we get started, tell us about yourself. Who is Quinn Mitchell?
Well, Quinn Mitchell is a 15-year-old political and historical enthusiast. I'm a political nerd, so when the candidates come through in New Hampshire, I know it's happening in my backyard, so I want to play a part in it and ask these questions. And for some reason, it takes a 15-year-old to ask the questions. I don't know why, but I'm just, glad to be out there and asking the questions that are on people's minds that they don't get the chance to ask them.
Now, New Hampshire is still the first primary state, right?
Oh, yeah, it is. I'm a bit worried about the future, but currently it is.
Yeah, so that must be great, man. I followed the Bernie campaign. I guess it was back in 2015 on the Bernie press bus in California, up and down the state. And that was a great time of my life, man. I enjoyed that so much. Have you had a chance yet to travel with embed yourself in with one of the candidates? Well,
no, not yet. I mean, I did sort of shadow Biden. I went to all of his events and a few of his interviews one day. Even though I wasn't technically, officially doing that. But no, I haven't gotten the chance to. But I hope to do so soon. But even not doing that, I'm seeing what type of stress is on a candidate each day. It's interesting to see, and it's an experience you don't get anywhere else. To be honest with you.
You're absolutely right. You come into contact with we hung out with Kristen Walker back in 2016 for a whole day, and now here she is. Meet the press, man. It's not that long ago, But let me ask you a quick question. Okay, you followed Biden for a whole day, right? Now, when people see Biden on TV, they say, "Look at that old man! Look at him. He's got no vim, no vigor." Were you exhausted after that day following that guy around?
Extremely exhausted. I can't express it enough. It was 90-degree heat, and the guy was doing 3 to 4 events, multiple interviews, and he's doing it at 75 years old at that time. I was doing it when I was 10 years old, and I was exhausted then. It's just, one of the several things in political campaigning and, having to be a politician that makes me not want to do that. But, I mean, just the extraordinary stresses that is on these people to be right 100% of the time. When I was with Biden, he made a gaffe. He said he was in Vermont instead of New Hampshire. And Jeanine Pirro and Fox News was blasting him for that the next day. And listen, it doesn't matter what party it is. I can understand making a gaffe in that situation. I think I would do it too. Yeah. The amount of campaigning you have to do.
Oh, yeah, we do it right now. But I followed Bernie around one day to 3 huge events in Vegas. We were all exhausted. And in between those events, he was having meetings with union leaders and all kinds of stuff. I don't know how these guys do it.
I don't know either. Biden has so many meetings, and I don't have the mental durability. I don't think you do either.
Yeah. Or even the physical strength to do. You shake Bernie's hand; he's very, very strong. Why don't we get into the whole story about what made Quinn Mitchell famous? Okay, how you got on my radar? Tell us about the whole story about Ron DeSantis.
Oh wow, that's I'm gonna be here for a while if I tell you the whole story. So I'm gonna sum it down for you a bit. All right. So my first event for Ron DeSantis was a June 1st event. All right. This was right after he started his campaign, and he was looking to be the most viable alternative for Trump. The donors were behind him, and I heard him speak. He didn't take any questions. first of all, that's not going to go. I mean, it's just a starting campaign. So it's June 1st, right? He didn't take any questions, which I don't think was going to help in New Hampshire. He didn't greet anybody after. He was trying to run down the aisle. He wasn't trying to, greet anybody afterwards. So those early signs just told me he wouldn't do it very well in the red state. He didn't take any questions. But at the end of his remarks, he talked about the key principles of America and how important it was for us to uphold them. And on June 27th, he had a town hall, right? And okay, great. He's going to take questions. And I know that one of those principles he talked about how he must uphold is, the peaceful transfer of power. So, and then I knew that some people thought that Trump broke the peaceful transfer of power. And I posed a question. June 27th, I stood up and asked the governor, Governor, do you think Trump violated the peaceful transfer of power, a key principle of American democracy that we must uphold? Pretty simple question. It wasn't, one of my better questions in the campaign trail by far. It's one of my more relaxed questions, actually. And he stumbled. He pivoted to, we shouldn't, relitigate things that happened 2 to 3 years ago, because if we do, then we'll lose the general election. And, the funny thing is his whole speech was relitigating the past when it came to Florida, life in Florida 3 years ago. What shocked me that day was that he didn't have a better answer than a 40-second, stumbling answer. And that is a topic that's on a lot of people's minds, and the fact that his advisors, didn't prepare him for that shocked me. So a week later, I went to the Merrimack July 4th parade, and I wanted to give him a chance to re-answer. And I also feel a bit sorry for all the trouble I got him in, because it's not my, goal going into these events to make you look like an idiot in the eyes of some. And he definitely appeared that way to some people. But I wanted to apologize, but I also wanted to give him a chance to re-answer it. So I immediately was, met with hostile glares from the campaign. The first 2 times I tried to go up to him, I got blocked by campaign staffers. And it got to the point that I just texted my mom about it. I was like, why are they trying to remove me? Isn't this a public space? And my mom was like, yeah, it is. I mean, it's a July 4th parade. Everybody's talking to him. A lot of people are going up to him. But, I was the sole person who's getting denied from doing that. And eventually I worked my way up. I shook his hand, and I was like, Governor, I'm that kid who asked you that question, Hollis. He nodded and said, oh, I remember you. And I said, oh, look, I'm sorry for all the trouble you get into. I got into for the question. And, after I finished that, I felt this tug from behind, and I was surrounded and prevented from moving forward by his security team. And, that happened, and I was shocked in the aftermath of that. That a campaign had gone to that extent to avoid answering a very simple question about January 6th. It was concerning to me in the least. It was also a restriction of free speech. And on August 18th, I went to another town hall, and I wanted to ask him a question, because for some reason, if you go to a Chris Christie event and you go to a Ron DeSantis event, you're going to notice there is a, certain, how do I say this, level to some questions. Christie gets way harder questions than DeSantis does. DeSantis gets posed questions about wokeness about 5 times every event. That's a hyperbole, but, it just gets really repetitive and makes for an environment that is really not, beneficial to voters, or just hearing the same things over and over again. And also, the DeSantis campaign also likes to really control the environment, in my experience.
Oh, yeah.
They don't like him having spontaneous encounters with people. So I was blocked from approaching him in that event, too. I was blocked from moving forward. I later learned that someone, his campaign staff were taking pictures of me with the caption, "God, our kid." The Daily Beast ran a story about all of the events I just mentioned. Then last week, and this is the finale to the story right now. And listen, I don't know if the DeSantis campaign was responsible. I don't think I ever will. But last week I went to a event by the New Hampshire GOP. It was the First of the Nation Summit. I sent an email over last Wednesday wondering if I could attend, because I wasn't sure if they were allowing teenage attendance. Friday morning, I was in our beautiful state capitol hearing and seeing Nikki Haley and Mike Pence file for president. Later that morning, I received an email and just said, okay, great, you're at Blood. Now, I'm 30 minutes away from, Nashville, New Hampshire, where the event is taking place. So I figured I might as well, pop over and hear Perry Johnson, Chris Christie speak. I entered the event. The event the guy who's taking credentials just asked me, okay, what do you want to do here? Who are you? And I said, well, my name is Quinn Mitchell. I'm a 15-year-old political enthusiast. I genuinely love learning about politics, and I consider this a whole learning experience, which is all true, right? And got to the event, I heard Chris Christie speak. I asked a question. I went to one of his press briefings since his, advisors invited me to. And then afterwards, I popped in to hear Perry Johnson speak. I'm just, I'm taking film, and I was actually planning to leave after that because my mom wanted to get home since it was already a very long day for us, and she had work she needed to do. So I was just going to pop off, after that. And, while I'm taking film, like 95 other people in the, venue are, because it's, C-SPAN is live streaming it. This woman comes up to me and she says, I know who you are. You're a tracker. And, I don't know what a tracker is. I later learned it's basically a disturbance. Someone from a rival campaign who's there getting film and getting, research on different candidates. That's what I later learned it was. And she said, okay, follow me. And she takes me into this back GOP room. There's some people in there with a very serious face on there, very serious look on their face. And the guy who took my credentials, who I just mentioned a few minutes ago, comes up to me and says, you misrepresented yourself and you lied about yourself. I'm extremely confused because I haven't lied about anything going into the event because, everything I said, 15-year-old political enthusiast, love learning about politics, it's a learning experience. It's all true, right? And the woman says to me, look, you're a disturbance. You've been known to be one. We have had to physically remove you from 2 other events. And, my mind's jumping through possibilities. Like, what is happening here? Can this be happening again? It's extremely stupid this is happening again. And, my mind, jumps, to DeSantis because...
Let me stop you for a second, man. Did they have any cops there? Anybody with a badge or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, they did. I'm about to get that into...
Go ahead, yeah.
All right, so I say to the woman, and, mine jumps to DeSantis because I know he has that culture of intimidation, wanting to control the environment. I said to her, look, the DeSantis campaign said you have to do this. She didn't have a response from me. She didn't say yes or no. The guy takes my badge and she said, okay, these guys are going to walk you out. The guys who are going to walk me out are 3, 4, or 5 police officers and a couple of GOP security. And now here's where it gets really stupid. They walk me past all the press. And the press know all the story between from me and DeSantis. And they know there's a story to be made here.
Right.
So as soon as I walk out the door, I've hit a massive amount of phone calls, and all these, some press came out and wanted to interview me about it. And I called my mom, and she says, okay, she's just shocked. She thought that I was joking at first because she was just shocked this happened again. And she says, okay, well, let me finish checking out, and I'll be over there. So she gets over there, and she goes in and sees what's going on. And the security basically tells her, look, the GOP security, not the police, tells her that we don't know what's happening here. We're going to go see what's happening. 20 minutes later, he comes out again and basically tells me what happened. So he went to go talk with the 2 GOP people who removed me. And basically what they told him that I was disrupting the event by taking footage.
Okay.
Like 95 other people were. And in the security, basically, I had to tell them, look, he hasn't done anything to be kicked out of the event. He didn't break any laws. So basically, they restored my credentials. And the sad thing about this is that the police and the GOP security were lied to from the GOP. And they were some of the nicest people in the world. And I think another question is who's at fault here? I don't think I'll ever know who's at fault here. I will never know the full story, and I probably never will. I mean, one thing I also know is you don't come to the conclusion that I'm a Democrat tracker and I'm disrupting the event out of thin air. It just doesn't happen. So someone or some campaign did not want me there. They did not want my presence, or they did not want me asking my question. I mean, did the woman personally call DeSantis and ask her and ask him if he wanted me removed? Definitely not. But does DeSantis campaign have this culture of intimidation and wanting to control the environment? I mean, yes. But what's very clear to me is, someone or some campaign did not want me there.
Okay, I got a million questions. First of all, I love the line.
Sure you do.
I love the line. I'm going to call my mom.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm 15. That's what my mind jumps to.
I love it, man. Okay, now, for people that don't understand the process to get in there to begin with, okay, now you have a podcast. It's called Into the Tussle Podcast, into the quinnmitchell.com. They can find this podcast. So do you go ahead and you email the campaign and say, hey, I'd like press credentials to attend your event? Do you ask for that?
Oh, well, I just asked I didn't specifically include my podcast.
Okay.
Basically, the email just said that I'm 15 years old. I'd love to learn about politics. I'd love to be allowed admission to the event. Admission to the
event. Okay, so then you're not getting in and getting Wi-Fi and getting a little desk or a spot with your name on it and that kind of stuff?
Nope, that's not my goal. I was just going to pop in for a couple hours and just hear some speakers I haven't heard yet and, hopefully ask a couple of questions. And I was just taking film footage like 95 other people were. Gotcha.
So then basically you're a member of the public, okay? And have you ever been denied access to any of these events?
No. I've had people try to deny me access before, but no, I haven't never been denied access from an event before.
Okay, yeah, I was actually blacklisted from Trump for a while, and
yeah,
I knew. The first time I got access, I was so excited. I was right because it's the Opperman report, Opperman report with an O. And I was right between the L.A. Times and the Washington Post, LMNOP. And I was so excited to be sitting with all these, real credentialed journalists, and here's this wacky radio guy. And but then Trump banned me. I could no longer get credentials. And one night, in the middle of the night, I got a phone call from someone pretending to be a poll taker. And I could hear people giving her questions to ask me in the background. Like, are you feeling you could? Yeah. Oh, it's the craziest thing.
Oh my.
But people don't realize how amateur hour a lot of these events are, right?
I mean, first of all, there's more like strategic ways you could remove me, or you or me from an event. There's more strategically wise ways rather than walking me out the front door.
Yeah, that was totally bizarre, too, there as well. Okay, now, what, do you go to these events alone, or does your mom go with you?
Well, sometimes what happens is, first of all, I'm 15, I can't drive. So
right.
I always have to convince my mom one way or another, or working a certain amount of hours to go to the event. And she'll take me. Usually, sometimes she goes in with me, but sometimes she'll just drop me off, and usually we're in a pretty, urban area, so there's errands she can go run, and I'll just sit in the event. But usually she does come in with me. That specific event, it's like $200 at the door, but I got in for free. So she just went to go get some errands.
Wait, how much was it to get in the door?
It was $200, but I managed to get into for free. Just
because you were like a student enthusiast.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think they wanted to advance youth engagement at the event, which I appreciated. I got in for free. The people who paid, I think, are the people who got the food, but I think there was a lot of people who just got in for free.
Gotcha. Okay, and then what about now when you go to these events? Does the press recognize you? Do you mingle with the press?
Listen, I have a lot of great friends in the press. I've been doing it for 5 years. I've been to 90 plus events at this point.
Okay.
They're in the 100 mark. And I know people in the press. It's always great seeing them. Great seeing them. There's a lot of reoccurring faces, especially with the embeds. It's quite a life being an embed. I gotta say, after 5 years of watching this. But it's great, and there's always a lot of reoccurring faces. New Hampshire's a small state. There's always people to talk to, always people. It's a great environment, to be honest with you. At most events.
Has anyone in the press reached out to you and say, "Hey, we want you to be a correspondent for us"?
No. I'm 15. I think it's a wee bit silly, but I certainly wouldn't say no if the opportunity presents itself.
Gotcha.
But I feel like it's a bit egotistic for me to say that, being 15 and all.
No, not really, because especially nowadays, there's a few young journalists out there that's a niche. It's out there for sure.
What baffles me is that I actually get more opportunities in the press sometimes to ask my questions, especially early on this Sanchez campaign, because some people and some campaigns, they won't do any interviews with media networks that are not like-minded.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I get better opportunities in the press to ask the questions, and that's why I started my podcast, to talk about that and, have a platform to do so.
And what do you do on the podcast? Do you interview people or you just talk?
So right now it's like the starting of my podcast. I've been making like episodes, like I released one talking about my removal from the event. I released one talking about how my experiences at Trump events have gathered an understanding of how, this MAGA movement is a community and why they're so loyal to Trump. I've released episodes talking about why Vivek Ramaswamy is running for vice president. I've asked him that point blank before. But soon I do hope to get more interviews on the podcast, but I think it's just a more interesting dialogue, honestly, on the podcast. If there's interviews, and it's just more interesting conversation, usually more meaningful conversation. But you have to start somewhere, and my somewhere is just making these, 10, 11, 12-minute, podcast episodes talking about my experiences of going to the events. But I hope to get interviews soon. And
this is basically your solo reporting. You're not like having a co-host or a guest.
Yeah, I don't have opportunities to get a co-host or guest currently, but gotcha. I might have a few opportunities soon, which I'm looking at. Gotcha.
Now, out of all these campaigns, when you go visit these events, who do you find is running the most professional campaign right now?
Oh, yeah. In New Hampshire, it should be politics, 101, that you have open forum town halls. You greet voters after events. You take a selfie or sign something for them. But to a lot of campaigns, it's not politics 101, and they're not doing it. New Hampshire isn't, your usual state. We have great expectations for you in regards to retail politics. So when you don't do that, it's going to hurt you here. And for some campaigns, it's not politics 101. Like, they don't do a lot of questions. They don't, greet voters after events. That's what's really hurting them. Nikki Haley and Chris Christie have hosted the most open forum events. I think Chris Christie especially. I've definitely seen candidates do well here when they have leaned to more of a question-formatted event. They do a lot well here. They seem more genuine and more human oftentimes, I found, when they take more questions. And the candidates who are taking more questions and encouraging the audience are doing well here. Chris Christie has that. And, there's a lot of independence here in New Hampshire. So, someone with DeSantis, like the culture war, the 6-week abortion stance, coming in here with that stuff is not necessarily going to help you. That's why you see candidates like, Chris Christie and Nikki Haley doing so well here. They can appeal, somewhat to moderates, Chris Christie especially. I think, Chris Christie has done the best here in New Hampshire from my experiences of doing open forum town halls and taking a lot of questions. My only problem with his events is his answers are too thorough, and he takes too long answering them, which makes the drive home too long. He talks for like 2 hours, like an hour and 45 minutes of taking questions. Nikki Haley is doing very, very well here, too. She's taking questions. She's greeting voters. And both those candidates I just mentioned, they're spending all the time they need to after events greeting voters. And they make time for that, which really helps you here.
And both of them have been there before. They did this 4 years ago.
Well, yeah, Nikki Haley, she campaigned here up in 22 and 20, I think, for some, midterm stuff. And advancing local candidates, but Christie is an expert to this. He did 100 town halls in 2016.
Really?
I don't think Haley's never ran before, but she has been up here a lot for midterms and stuff, advancing local Republican candidates.
So you were down in 2016 as well. How old were you then?
Well, I wasn't. Honestly, I only started doing things in 2019.
Okay.
Not 2016. The 2020 cycle. I was way too young in the 2016 cycle. I read a lot of books in the 2016 cycle. I think the only event I went to back then was a Chelsea Clinton event or something, to be honest. I vaguely remember it anyway. But no, 2019 is where this really got started for me.
Now, has there been has the DeSantis campaign reached out to you to apologize or say, hey, let's smooth this over, we'll take out to lunch?
Surprisingly not. I kind of expected after the July 4th parade for there to be an apology. Just some low-level staffer calling me. And DeSantis himself told my mom that he gets to the bottom of it. And
wait. No, Did DeSantis told your mom? Wait, DeSantis said something to your mom? What did he say?
He told her we'll get to the bottom of it.
Okay.
And clearly didn't, because it happened again the next time I went to an event. But, I think it'd be strategically wise to have some low-level staffer. But I'm not out here fishing for an apology. It came to the point where I thought it was important to share the story because it was just such a bizarre occurrence. It's never happened to me before.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had Thomas Kennedy down here, who's a local Florida activist reporter, and he's on an enemies list. DeSantis has an enemies list down here of people who tweet badly about him. if you tweet...
Yeah, I definitely... He's intrigued me. I haven't looked into him too much, but it definitely seems like DeSantis does have an enemy list.
Yeah.
I can't be shocked if 15-year-old was on that, but who knows?
Yeah, Thomas Kennedy, I had him on the show, and he talked to the cop, and the cop said, "You're on the list of people, that are banned from DeSantis events, public events."
Why would the cop tell him that?
I think it was an accident, but then he went freedom of information. He got a copy of the list. It was a whole thing. Yeah, you should look into it. You should talk to Thomas Kennedy, man. He would love to talk to you.
I will. I think he follows me on Twitter. I might reach out one day.
I'm sure he does. Yeah. Any friend of DeSantis is a friend of ours. Okay. Now, what about back to Michael Quinn? Quinn Mitchell. Back to Quinn Mitchell. Now, what are you studying in school? Are you on speech and debate?
Ooh, okay. So the bad thing about my high school is we don't have a political club, which haunts me to this day.
Yeah.
It's tough. But the good thing about my school and the middle school I went to is that they did have independent interests. So I do get time to get out of school for political events because they recognize the educational opportunity there.
Yeah.
But luckily, the schools I've been to have allowed me to pursue my interests in an independent way. And I've definitely taken some good historical and a few good political classes so far. But as I advance in high school, there's going to be some better classes. But I appreciate that my school has had time to and understanding for my political interests thus far.
And what grade are you in?
I'm in ninth grade.
Ninth grade. Okay, that's still early. Okay, great. You got plenty of time. And but your school doesn't have speech and debate. But sometimes the forensic speech and debate will take kids from if their school doesn't have it, when there's still a team they can join. Have you looked into that?
Oh, I have. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Definitely look into that. My daughter benefited greatly from speech and debate, and she's in politics now today. And it's a really they look for you in there, okay? That's a real spot to be in, and it's great for your resume too for college. Are you looking at colleges yet?
No, it's something I'd rather not think about either. So
really, okay. Then what do you think about your future, though? You think it's politics or journalism?
Man, I mean, I really love journalism. I definitely like to pursue that in some way, and that's why I'm doing my podcast. It does seem a bit egotistical. I feel like talking about this, this at such an early age, but I love journalism. I love everything about it. I don't think being a politician is the place for me, though. To be honest with you, just seeing what I've seen on the campaign trail and whatnot.
Gotcha. Now, you were just recently also interviewed by the BBC. How did that go?
Oh, it was great. I was extremely happy to be on BBC NewsHour, and it was also great to have an opportunity to voice my views on youth engagement. I can get into that some here if you want me to, but I'd love having a platform for that. Definitely because BBC is definitely a really old demographic. I just told them that, and it was also beneficial for me to speak that way because young people need encouragement from old people in their life to take interest. Because I was lucky enough and privileged to have older people from an early age, when I was 9, 10, 11, taking me seriously and having dialogues with me about very important and complex political issues. A lot of kids my age don't share that privilege. Their parents won't talk to them about advanced political issues. Even the Israel and Hamas war. I mean, young people are getting exposed to really horrific places in the world and horrific things at such a young age due to social media, like TikTok and Twitter for whatnot. They're getting exposed to this, and adults in their life need to talk to them about it. And the people at the table right now, they're very old people, and even in Congress, when we elect people, I've met a lot of young people who just feel worried about how old people are in Congress and that they don't understand them. And older people need to understand that we need to bring young people to the table. Older people have become disencouraged somewhat, just where the world is. But they don't come to the table out of the blue. They need a lot of encouragement, and adults need to take them seriously. The second point to that is also that I know some young people who have had to choose between their social life and voicing what they believe in, both on the conservative and the liberal side. Since I'm friends with people from across the political spectrum, it's really an unfathomable choice. And, cancel culture is such an epidemic, which chooses young people to choose between that. And it just leads them to become even more discouraged. And they also feel people down in Washington and people down in the White House don't represent them. And they don't understand them. So there's definitely that lack of understanding. So I'm just glad to have that platform to talk about that, especially since a lot of these places I'm going on has that older demographic. And I actually think it's really helpful for me to share that. And I also don't want to use a platform, 100% based on attacks, since I think that's just, farthering the division. I was on CNN once, and Abby Phillips was trying to prod me a bit to make this a food fight between me and DeSantis. And I just told her, look, I'm not looking for a food fight, because that's not who I am. And just having a platform to share that message about how young people need to be encouraged is, extremely helpful.
Okay, there's a lot of stuff there. Now, what about?
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, I know. Now, what about? Now you have a podcast now, and you're on Twitter. What about stuff like TikTok? It seems like TikTok's very popular, but to me, it also seems like it's really narrowing down people's attention span. Are you taking advantage of TikTok?
I definitely agree with you on the attention span part. But that's a whole other topic we probably don't have time for.
Yeah.
But definitely, I am taking advantage of TikTok just because there's a lot of younger demographics on there.
Right.
And just have an opportunity to, talk about politics for a minute or two is extremely beneficial. But I'm definitely more of a Twitter-oriented person. I've never been a TikTok person, but I definitely think it's interesting to reach younger demographics there.
Yeah, it's a shame that we look at Twitter now as the more mature, the more in-depth content.
That's the sad thing to say. I'm not gonna lie.
I know, man. I gotta tell you, man. Because when I was your age, man, I used to read like 5 newspapers a day and have the radio on all day long. New York Times over here, Washington Post. And now forget it. It's just a whole different world.
Yeah, I wish I lived in those days. There's a lot of people who get the news from Twitter now.
Yeah,
which is definitely not the best place for that. TikTok's even worse.
What about talk radio? I grew up in New York City, and we had talk radio. We had this big leftist station called WBAI. It was these socialists and communist leftists. And then we had like the right-wingers like Bob Grant and all the WABC. And what kind of – do you listen to talk radio?
Oh, I listen to a lot of podcasts now.
Podcasts.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't really listen to a lot of radio not that much anymore, but one thing that's really important for me is listening to people across the political spectrum, because a lot of people don't do that, and that's kind of what leads them to being close-minded when they hear the same reoccurring opinions on different political matters each and every day. So you're never getting the full story if you're just looking at one side. So I really try to view both sides. Sometimes I'll watch Alex Jones, for instance, just to hear what he's saying. But, I listen to people from all sides, and I try to do that. But honestly, I don't listen to a lot of radio. I did that more when I was younger because I didn't have a phone, so I just turn on, NPR and whatnot. But, on the ways, when I'm going to school each morning, my mom likes to turn on, BPR, NPR. So I definitely get to listen to that.
Who do you have influencing your political opinions and your perspectives?
Well, unlike the Yahoo comments, I don't really have anybody who encouraged me to be the indoctrinated communist.
Wait, Yahoo comments say you've been indoctrinated as a communist?
Yeah.
I've never seen you at any of the meetings.
My mom never thought that. My mom never thought she was influencing me in that way. So it was quite an ordeal for her to realize she had that. So, listen, I hope that doesn't be taken out of context, but, my parents, they don't try to, they encourage me to show up. They encourage me to ask the questions. They don't try to influence me in any way. And it's definitely helped me build my political opinions and looking at people from across the spectrum. There's nobody who really influences me. My parents don't influence me. They're not indoctrinating me. But I do know people from across the political spectrum. The people who, hey our farm. They're like very strong Trump supporters. So I'll often have a dialogue with them, trying to enlighten myself on what they believe in. I also know I go to school with a lot of liberals, so I get to hear that side there. But I make the effort to try to talk to everybody across the political spectrum, and I definitely feel like that leaves me grasping a stronger understanding of a lot of political matters than, people who are in their own echo chambers and whatnot. And that's extremely beneficial for me, and I've tried to introduce my friends to doing that. It's been hard to do it, though.
Now, one of your podcasts is about how the Trump supporters are like a community. Okay, so explain to me what you found there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been to 2 Trump events so far. I met the guy a couple of times. And a Trump event is like, no other. Mm-hmm. When you go in, there's like, there's rock music, there's Donald Trump bobblehead, there's like 15 different vendors. There's people blasting music, there's people chanting. But really you'll often find, people talking to each other. And, they might not know each other, but they have the social capability to walk up and have, a conversation. And it's not always about politics. It's about sports or how the Red Sox did or how the Patriots did. But it's really like a community. And, when people, can't find community, community is, really a human essential that we all need to thrive on and to feel wanted and loved. And a lot of these Trump supporters I've talked to, they feel shunned in society and degraded due to their views. So they seek their community elsewhere, and they find that community within like a like-minded, demographic. They find at these, Trump rallies and going to them. So they find a community there. The second thing is, what really draws them in is that Trump is, extremely, extremely charismatic. And a lot of people just don't understand that about him. He is one of the most charismatic people I've ever seen. Just on the ground and watching him sign autographs or taking selfies. I got on selfies with him before. It's quite an ordeal. He makes everybody in the crowd feel heard and wanted and loved. He makes sure to point at everybody. He's extremely charismatic. And, charismatic isn't always a good word. You can use it for evil, too. Let's take for these leaders, for example. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to say fascist leaders on your radio show.
Sure.
But there's a few fascist leaders, and there's people like Bill Clinton, who's extremely charismatic. There's people like Donald Trump, who's extremely, charismatic. And you could subjectively say that Bill Clinton and Donald Trump are extremely good people and use their charismatic personality to advance their, really good agenda. But, you can subjectively say that. Donald Trump is very charismatic, and that's what draws them in. But what keeps them in the MAGA movement is really this community they find within. And and a lot of people, they don't, grasp an understanding of that. You really have to go to these events to build the understanding of why Donald Trump has such a loyal and robust base of support.
Well, what about, because I've been to these events, I've been to a lot of Trump events, and there's a lot of people there, they believe in QAnon, and they think that Trump is still commander-in-chief and that Biden's wearing a mask. There's a real, there's a lot of really crazy stuff going on there, man. Are you seeing that up there in New Hampshire?
Oh, yeah. I've met people who think that, Antifa stormed on January 6th. When I went into the event, there's like this parking garage, and the first floor, there was like a lot of stickers saying all of Congress should be hanged. So, I've definitely seen those people there, but I also know a lot of really nice Trump supporters, so I don't think, you should generalize that movement as such. But I definitely met a lot of nice people there, but, as with a lot of rallies, there's always going to be the people who are really far, right or left. But it's a very crazy environment, and they don't want to disagree on anything either. There's a lot of echo chambers there. They don't want to disagree on anything. There's a January 6th. I've met 2 January 6ers there so far. There's this one January 6th at this rally I went to, and there's like 10 people surrounding her, and they were congratulating her on what she did on that day. Yeah. So they don't want to disagree on anything. But I've definitely seen the environment you just described there. No,
I interviewed Jake Angeli, the QAnon shaman, the guy with the horns.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah, nice. I can hook you up with him, man. I'll hook you up with him. You guys, and you want to know what, man? He's a nice guy. He's a nice guy.
I'd love to interview him.
He's a little crazy, man. But, he's a nice guy, He means well. I tell you, this is a guy that means well in the world. He doesn't want ill in the world for anybody. But, he's into some stuff, man. Now, what about this? I can recall one time going to a Hillary Clinton rally, and the Clinton rallies and the Clinton political events were run like clockwork. Like their staff were like people you could tell they just graduated from Harvard and MIT, and these were like professional guys in suits. Well, you go to other rallies, they just run by amateurs. They're run by volunteers. And they're feeding the press. They're bringing us food from Roberto's. They figured out the local place. Everybody likes the local food. Bring them Roberto's tacos. But you'd go into these events. I remember one time going there, and the place was empty. It was an hour late. And suddenly a bunch of guys come in with hard hats and tool belts, and they took a bunch of workers off the union site and brought them down there to fill up the crowd. Okay. And no one, then I look up on the wall, it says maximum occupancy 200, and they're claiming there was 1,000 people there. Have you been to an event where you saw the press report one thing and you were there and say, hey, man, Quinn Mitchell, I was there myself, and that's not what happened?
Oh, I mean...
Oh, right? Tell them.
Oh, boy. I think, I honestly cannot, vividly think. I definitely think I've been in scenarios like that. Yeah. I've seen audience attendance be, drastically, overstated. I think, I vaguely remember this, but, a Trump rally I went to, there were 3,000 people outside, and there was 1,000 people in there. And then people on Twitter were trying to say oh, well, Trump only drew 1,000 people to his campaign sign. But no, there's 3,000 people outside. But definitely going to the rally and then seeing the aftermath. And my experience with the media so far is that there's always going to be one or two things just very inaccurate in an article.
Okay.
That's something I've just learned from being in the media before. And then, going to these rallies and seeing reports written about afterwards. There's always going to be a few inaccurate things. But, it's quite a, interesting experience seeing what's reported when you go into a rally and see it, firsthand rather than just, seeing it on Twitter.
Does it make you cynical?
Sorry?
Does it make you cynical?
Ooh, I don't...
Or how about even more suspect of what you see on the news, and you say, oh, boy,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely heard journalists say before that a lot of the press corps is cynical and motivated purely by self-interest.
Yeah.
I've seen a few people who are like that so far. I've seen a few interviews where people have tried to do that, try to just get what they want from me. But I definitely have met a lot of really nice people in the press before. And I'd rather not think that the people in the press are motivated purely by self-interest. Yeah, but I don't think the, press corps is, really cynical, but, I could not be seeing the full picture. But the people I've met so far are, pretty nice. But I definitely have met a few people who are quite the opposite before.
Now, what about ever notice some of the press people, especially for the major networks, they seem to be a privileged class, maybe born with a silver spoon and kind of had an easy life?
I mean, my only really, really bad experience with the press. Well, I'll tell you. You ready to hear this?
Yeah.
So I was at a Joe Biden event. All right, it was June 4th in 2019, and I go into the event, and I'm 11 years old then. All right, my mind's not really. I don't know a lot about asking questions, whatnot. My dad tells me, "Look, hey, you should ask about dogs." Like, Dad, no, that's the dumbest question I've ever heard of. I'm going to ask if Trump should have impeachment trials. And so I asked that to Biden, and Biden's like, what's your age? Then he says something like, his answer's like, oh, well, I think it's too much of a distraction currently. And the next day, Laura Ingraham on the Ingram Angle sees this, and she's like, well, I mean, he obviously lacks the intellectual capabilities to ask such a question. I bet his parents set him up to do this, and he's just a Biden plant. I mean, he's a student. He's a plant. So that's my pretty, bad experience. It was devastating seeing that as a 11-year-old. I was very sad about when it came out. I couldn't understand why such a person would say such a thing about me. But now I look back at it with humor. I mean, just seeing how dumb it was, to be frank. But that's my experience of some media trying to, feed their narrative and keep their narrative just off of something which is, completely untrue. And sometimes they'll make statements that are just like questions. Like, he couldn't have asked that question because he doesn't have intellectual capability to do that. Well, they don't know that. So sometimes we'll make statements like that just to, fill the narrative and build a narrative. That's been my like really bad experience with the press so far.
Yeah, and publicly pick on an 11-year-old while you're at it.
Like, he does that.
You know what I mean? And she has a pretty big audience.
Yeah.
I mean, a target an 11-year-old kid, just trying to show up. And that must have been heartbreaking. I'd say 11 years old. Come on, I don't care how tough you are.
I mean, come on. I was 11 years old. It was pretty heartbreaking seeing that. And it definitely demotivated me a bit, but my parents encouraged me to keep showing up, which was extremely helpful.
So then, okay, Quinn Mitchell, if I would ask you, what the biggest misconception about Quinn Mitchell that you want to correct right now? Did I lose you?
A lot of people.
Okay, start over right now, because that's the first I just heard. The biggest misconception about Quinn Mitchell that you want to correct right now.
Okay, I've been meaning to say this. I was going to make a podcast episode, but I'll share it with you.
Okay.
I'll share this with you today. So I've seen a lot of people try to paint me as a liberal stooge and a plant, just because they don't particularly see really hard questions of me asking Democrats. And the reason for that is, first of all, Democrats, except RFK and Marianne, aren't campaigning here at all. I've seen people yell at me and try to make arguments that I'm a liberal plant based on the fact that they don't really see a really hard question from me posing to Biden yet. That's really because Democrat candidates aren't campaigning here, and I don't have chances to ask, Democrat candidates those really hard questions like I do with the Republicans now who are campaigning here. But if Biden show up in New Hampshire, which he probably will never do right now, I will certainly ask him a question. And any Democratic candidate who comes here, I will ask him questions of them. I mean, RFK is running independent, but when he was running as a Democrat, I asked him two questions. One of them was if he was running for vice president, which he said, look, I'm not doing that. I'm not running. I think I have to choose between my marriage and my political career. The other one, I asked him if Trump should be disqualified from the 14th Amendment, which he said no because it would create too much civil unrest. The only opportunity that I have to ask Democrat, candidate questions is RFK and Marianne because they're the only people campaigning here. I think a second one is that I'm a plant and I disrupt events, which is entirely untrue. I really go to these events to ask the questions that are on a lot of people's mind and to hopefully enlighten people based on the candidates' answers. Because sometimes I see a lot of questions that are reiterated a lot and the candidate just gets the old, stale talking point and whatnot. But I really try to ask the questions that are on people's minds that they just don't have the opportunity to ask them. So, I think the biggest misconception is that I only ask Republicans a hard question. The second one is I'm a plant, and my parents influenced me, which is, entirely untrue. The only time my parent encouraged me or gave me a question idea was when my dad pitched asking Biden about dog's name. So that sort of describes the relationship between my parents and my question.
I just think now that after all those people bitten by Biden's dogs, that might have been a good question. That might have been a better question in hindsight.
Yeah, on afterthought, it might have been a good question.
Yeah, how many people have been bitten by your dogs, Mr. Biden? Now, you said you went to a Marianne Williamson event. Is that what you said?
Oh, I've been to one. That was back in March when my questions I wasn't as good as I am
Ben,
now.
real quick, how are those events being run these days? Because they were in yoga studios when I went to those last time. What's going on over there now? Yoga?
Oh, the Marianne side.
What's that?
The Marianne side.
Yeah. Marianne Williamson.
Oh yeah, she runs a pretty good campaign. She has a good talk. She definitely tries, connect to a lot of her points to history. A side point is that hilarious thing is Ramaswamy always mentions and name drops Ben Franklin, George Washington, Abe Lincoln, which is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. But Marianne, she connects a lot of the history. She always has interesting speeches and whatnot. I haven't been to one since April or March, so I don't know how she's changed. But one thing I've noticed is that if you're running against Biden in a Democrat side, you're basically throwing away your political career in the views of the establishment. So she has a good talk. She's taken some questions, but I haven't been to one of her events since like April or March. But I've seen a few yoga studios before.
Well, you got to see her do yoga. Quinn Mitchell, quinnmitchell.com, Into the Tussle on Twitter, and Into the Tussle on Instagram too. He's a handsome kid. You can go there and follow him on Instagram. Are you on TikTok?
Oh, I am on TikTok. Quinn James Mitchell.
Quinn James Mitchell. Hey, Quinn, thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed this. Anytime you want to come back.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, anytime you want to come back, you got something you want to promote, just give me a call.
I love it.
Thank you very much.
Great conversation.
Quinn Mitchell, quinnmitchell.com, Into the Tussle, youngster podcaster, takes no prisoners. One day I'm going to take another 3 years. No, not 3 years. 21 or whatever, 15 to 20. 6 years. 6 years, I'm going to take you out for a drink. All right, bro. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.